Welcome, everybody, to the Smart Marks of Wrestling podcast presented by thesportster.com. Today is all about Money in the Bank, Raw, SmackDown, the 24/7 Championship, the return of Dolph Ziggler, and Double or Nothing is coming up this weekend. We'll chat with Brandon, and we got a very special guest. Chris van Vliet of YouTube fame is going to be on this edition. This is another edition of the Smart Marks of Wrestling podcast. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Smart Marks of Wrestling podcast presented by thesportster.com. Brandon is with us as always. Brandon, how you doing?
Hey, Jim, what's going on, man?
Oh, not much. Just organizing and reformatting and using a different version of the software to get these podcasts out there now, I'm finding out this morning. So a little extra legwork than I would normally do, but that's okay. That's just kind of the fun of doing these podcasts, is that the behind-the-scenes stuff is usually more work than the actual conversations, which are really fun. And we're going to have a lot of fun today because we have a very special interview that we did this past weekend with Chris van Vliet. He's YouTube fans that watch wrestling content on YouTube are going to know this guy really well because he has his own channel on YouTube where he interviews wrestlers and he gets some really good gets. And we had him on Friday. You're part of that conversation. So that's going to be fun to share on that. What did you think just in general of that conversation before our listeners get a chance to hear it?
God, he's just so down to earth and genuine, man. Like, I don't know that I've ever spoken to anybody on an interview like that, and it's just been so easy. And I mean, we've had like easy ones together, and I've done easy ones myself, and I'm sure you've done ones that are just like they flow real easily. But with Chris van Vliet, it was just the guy knows the industry, right? He does these interviews himself, so he knows how to be the perfect guest because he knows what the hosts are looking for. So I enjoyed it a lot.
Well, and he's a busy guy too. I mean, he had his birthday this weekend, so we sent him a very special happy birthday through our Twitter account at Wrestler Write-Ups. He is interviewing Cody today from AEW. So he asked if there were any questions that, we want to ask. And I had asked him to ask Cody, what's the deal with Pac? Is Pac under contract? Because that's the big news in AEW coming up for Double or Nothing here this weekend. So he's got a busy schedule, and he took the time to sit with us, but, sit on the phone with us for almost 45 to 50 minutes. So we appreciated him doing that, and I think our listeners are going to enjoy that. So that's good. But we got some other things to touch on before we air that interview. It was a busy week in WWE. I mean, I guess it's always busy. Money in the Bank was this past Sunday. Then Raw and SmackDown were a little hectic, and there was a new championship title introduced and a return of somebody. So let's start with the pay-per-view. What did you think in general of Money in the Bank? There are two sides to this. Some people loved it, and then some people hated it based on the ending. What was your take on Money in the Bank?
I absolutely loved it. It's been a while since I've seen a pay-per-view like this that I've actually just thoroughly enjoyed all the way through. I thought that, beginning to end, it was great. When I say the end, obviously the surprise ending with Brock Lesnar returning was something that, I mean, that's the reason why most people hated it, right? Like you said, they probably loved it up until that point. So I think that Lesnar holding the briefcase wasn't the right decision, but at the same time, I think this is the most exciting Lesnar's been in like 3 years.
I was just going to say.
Yeah, I mean, all we asked for, and that's all I've asked for, and I've said this week after week after week, is I want to be surprised. When Brock Lesnar's music hit and he came out, I was so torn because I was like, man, do we really need Lesnar with another championship run? But I was also like, you know what? This is a surprise. I'm genuinely shocked that Brock Lesnar is here. So kudos to them for keeping it a secret and somehow getting Brock Lesnar in the building without anybody knowing, because I don't know about you, but I didn't see it anywhere.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wrote a rumors article suggesting that Lesnar was coming back and might show up, but I didn't think he was going to be part of that match. That was not what I had expected. I figured at some point he was going to have something to do with Seth Rollins, because the word was that he and Seth were going to wrestle at the Saudi Arabia show.
Which makes it more confusing.
Right. And so they were going to bring him back potentially at Money in the Bank for that. To have him in the Money in the Bank ladder match at the end, he wasn't even in the match. He just showed up at the end. I think that's where most people's issues seem to come in, is that people are taking offense to the fact that this was a very stacked ladder match. Sami Zayn wasn't in it, and that was a missing ingredient for me because I thought he would have been really good. But there were some really good competitors in this match between Finn Balor and Andrade and Ricochet and Ali and guys that just could go. And they did some insane stuff in that match and crazy things that Brock Lesnar did not have anything to do with. And that's, I think, where people get the most upset. One, it's Brock Lesnar, and people may be sick of Lesnar. And two, these guys, I mean, they know what the deal is when they get into a Money in the Bank ladder match, but they did a lot of crazy stuff and didn't get rewarded for it. And that, I think, is where people seem to have, the most issue with this. I'm with you, though, in that we constantly ask week after week to be surprised, to not do the same old, same old. Well, yeah, Lesnar is a little bit of, but not like this. Like, this is not what I expected at all. And I didn't really take issue with the fact that he has it. I'm actually a little surprised that he's willing to do it. You know what I mean? Like, you get this whole vibe off of Brock Lesnar that he just wants to show up, be in a main event, collect his money, and go home. Well, I watched him on Raw walking down with that briefcase and acting like it was a boombox and smiling and having fun, and they said he would be there next week. And I'm like, this is the most excited I think I've seen Lesnar in forever. Like, he actually seems to be enjoying this part of whatever it is they're going to do with him. And I thought, that's different. Like, that's not the Lesnar we know. Lesnar just doesn't seem happy to be there when he's there. He seemed genuinely to be enjoying this.
To me, it seems like Lesnar, I mean, we know he's a freak athlete, but he's definitely all about the money. There's no doubt he's all about the money. But at the same time, if he's able to do this, maybe there's more to Brock Lesnar than we realize, because he's been more in the past. When he did the whole feud with Undertaker, before he beat him and everything, and after he beat him and whatnot, like, he was both like a baby face, like a parent, and like a heel, but like he wasn't just the character we know now, and he's been a different character over his years in WWE. So maybe he's just a lot better at his job than we think he is, and like we don't give enough credit for playing a role on TV. And just going back to your point on like, well, he didn't really do anything, and that's why people are mad about it. If Drew McIntyre would have won, I would be willing to bet that like 80% of fans, I'm not talking about like the regular fans who want like the babyface to win, but like, the marks of the world, they would have loved if McIntyre would have won the match, right? What did McIntyre do that was like super special compared to, an Andrade who like jumped like feet first through a ladder, Ali and Balor and all these guys? Like Finn Balor, man, that guy, he should be dead after that match. He was the MVP of the match just for the spots he took. Ricochet obviously had a great match, but again, if McIntyre would have won, no one would have batted an eye. So I think that those people are just looking for a reason to complain because it's Lesnar. That said, if you don't want Lesnar to have won the match, I totally get it. Like, I'm not going to argue with you in the fact that Lesnar shouldn't have won the match. Whether he should have or he shouldn't have, that's your opinion, but I can see why you'd have the opinion that he shouldn't have done it. Yeah. Either way, I'm happy. Either way.
Yeah. I don't take issue with people who like the fact that he won and some that hate the fact that he won. I don't care either way.
They've given you a reason to hate it.
Yeah. You know what? I'm ambivalent to the idea of him holding the briefcase. I don't care. I mean, it doesn't bother me that he won it the way that he won it or that he hasn't, because I think there is going to be some interesting stuff here. The idea that Lesnar, who probably doesn't need it and is dangerous, and now is going to just hunt people down with this briefcase is kind of a cool idea, actually. It is not something that I thought they would ever do, and so it's different. And different, I'm not going to complain about, because I've been complaining about the same for weeks on end. And when they finally do different, they don't stick with different. And, Wyatt might be the only thing that they are doing differently that they are committed to, right? So I'm going to choose my battles on this one. So yeah, I'm okay with it. The rest of the pay-per-view I thought was pretty good. Like, the matches were good. Rollins and AJ Styles was unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, that was a really good match. The women kicked it off, and I thought their match was good. There was a couple spots that were a little whatever, like the Nikki Cross ladder thing spinning around. That was obviously
I loved it.
It's a good idea, but the way they delivered it wasn't so.
But I'm just saying, like, she's like, usually when we see it now, like that like spinning ladder, like the air raid thing, it's usually just like, very slow and like deliberate. Like, I'm gonna hit this person and this person. Nikki Cross just started spinning, and I was like, good. This is awesome.
Did you notice the Mandy Rose goof up? Like, she was supposed to hit it the first time and then sort of didn't and fell down on her own. She like walked into the ladder on purpose, and then she got up and she did it again. And it's like, sometimes like I like the spot, but at the same time, when you're clearly running into the ladder so that you can take your one of the 7 hits from that ladder, it's a little cheesy. But other than that, I thought the match was really good. Yeah, the whole card was decent. I was a little surprised by the Usos pinning Daniel Bryan and Rowan in the pre-show, but whatever. It's not. I was grateful to see that the Usos then had a 5-star match with the Revival on Monday. That was really cool. So I mean, I'm not going to play. In fact, we can move right on to Raw. I thought Raw and SmackDown were okay, actually, considering how many weeks they haven't been wonderful. I'm surprised that I'm saying this, but this whole 24/7 title thing, which was the most anticipated part of Raw, was probably the biggest letdown for me on Raw. The rest of Raw was okay. What did you think of Monday night?
Yeah, I mean, I thought Raw was surprisingly good. It was no segment seemed out of place, and I think the funniest thing for me was actually when Mick Foley came out and he was doing the reveal of the belt. He had the bag with the WWE logo on it, but the belt was like half out almost.
Yeah.
So you can see it was a green strap, and the cameras you could tell the people in the truck were like, cut to this camera so we don't see it. And Foley would just keep walking and get in camera shot. And at one point they went tight on his face with the camera shot, and he lifts the bag up higher towards his face so it's still in shot.
They're panicking backstage. You can just see them freaking out backstage, can't you? Like you're just losing their mind, going, "Oh shit!" Like no, this can't be happening right now. Half the belt's hanging out, and
it was like a movie though. Like it was intentionally like, I'm gonna go here. Okay, well the camera's gonna go there, and it's just perfect.
Yeah, you could just visualize them yelling at the cameraman, "Move, move, move! Like get over to another place!" And I felt really bad for Foley because one, I mean that you would never expect it to happen, and two, they chose him one because of his connection to the hardcore title, which this is very similar to, other than the fact that it doesn't have a hardcore element to it,
which makes sense in today's day and age.
Right, in the pizza era, what are you gonna do? But they were hoping that he would be able to deliver this promo and people wouldn't, kick back the idea of this champion. Well, that didn't work. They did not. The fans did not receive this very well. I think it will grow on people as we watch some of these segments and some of the comedic stuff that comes out of it. And if people start to accept this belt for what it is, then they won't freak out as bad. But I did feel bad for Foley in that he was
he's just a blame for
spot, right?
He shouldn't have taken the blame for it. He did nothing wrong. And look, I don't think the title itself, first of all, the belt is ugly. That's the biggest thing. If the belt looked halfway decent, I think people would be more receptive to it. But my issue isn't that, the belt's concept. I think that having a title like this is fun, right? Like you said to me, it gets the mid-cards on TV. It might not be the best way to do it, but at least they get a spot on TV every week. I like the concept. I think the hardcore title back in the day was really fun. It was stupid. It was really stupid. But it was fun when you'd have 17 title changes in a span of 5 minutes. But I think that the idea of another championship on the roster itself is dumb. And I don't know why anyone would care about this title. There's no prestige with this, and there never will be prestige with it, right? Same thing with the hardcore title became. There's no prestige.
And that's not the point.
No.
You don't want that. In fact, if WWE tried to do that, I think it would be a mistake. If they even remotely connect this to other titles, the championships or the Intercontinental, that's where they're going to make a huge mistake. This belt, people are going to be all over the fact that belts mean nothing anymore and that they're adding a 15th belt to whatever and blah, blah, blah. Well, don't look at it that way. Just look at this as a fun little, think about it like a toy belt you'd buy at the store that just has money strapped to the back, and that's all you're trying to get. It means nothing in terms of championships. It's going to change hands 45 times before the end of this year. That's just the way that it's going to work. And if you don't think about it as a championship that actually means anything, then great, right? The idea of this is just to get people on TV, running around, goofy comedic spots, referees in awkward places that they shouldn't normally be, just stuff like that. That's what this is. That's all this is. Right. Yeah. And it's another way to circumvent the wild card rule so people can show up whenever they want to. They have a referee. Oh, hey, what's he doing here? He's not. It doesn't matter. Right. Just another way to get everybody on every show to maybe debut a couple NXT guys or NXT UK guys or give a little more show to the 205 Live guys that people don't watch. Just stuff like that. Right. That's all this is. So if this is where they go with it and that's where they stay with it, I think people will warm to it. But if they try to make it a championship that means something,
they will at one point, he's held this belt 6 times. Maybe he's going to work his way up the ladder.
Well, that'll be interesting when that happens because somebody's going to win this title 12 times.
in one
And when
night.
that happens, and he becomes one of the winningest champions in WWE history, just watch the storm that will come from that. Right? People will lose their mind over the idea that the winningest championship in the history of WWE is a guy who holds the 24/7 title, right? Or how are they going to work women into this whole thing? Because they didn't say anything about women not being eligible, right? So, or like Drake Maverick is an entertaining guy in this thing. Well, he's not nearly technically even a wrestler. Like, he's the GM of 205 Live. Like, there's all sorts of ways that this is going to go. And it's interesting. And if you remember back to the hardcore title, you remember Crash Holly?
Yeah.
There's a guy who took advantage of it, right? Like, that was a guy, rest in peace, that really saw an opportunity here. If you're one of those people, like Drake Maverick and R-Truth seem to be, and Matt Hardy always is, and you really, like, he had his kid, King Maxwell, like, he was on Twitter saying, I'm going to go for it, right? Like, you can really do something here, and there's an opportunity for you to make something of this. But if you're of the belief that it's like, I don't want to be connected to this piece of crap, like, this is way below anything that I want to be doing, you're just going to miss the boat on it, right? So you can either run with this and say, well, you make the most out of what you can, or you just choose to exclude yourself. The other thing I hope they don't do, I think I mentioned it yesterday in articles, that they better not attach any main event guys to this. Like,
oh, for sure. Yeah.
Don't put AJ Styles, don't put Seth Rollins, don't put Drew McIntyre, don't put any of those guys anywhere near this belt, right? Because once you do that, you basically said to the fans, this guy's no longer a main event guy.
The only person I could see being near it would be let Brock Lesnar just like be the guy for it for like 1 second, then just throw the belt to the ground, like away, like this is garbage, and let somebody else just come pick it up and be like, oh, I'm the champion now. That would be funny. And it wouldn't really hurt Lesnar because, I mean, nothing can hurt or help Lesnar. He is what he is.
Or a guy like Braun Strowman winning it by accident.
Yeah, that exactly.
You know what I mean? Like somebody runs around the corner, trying to run away from a group of people chasing him, runs into Braun Strowman, knocks himself out. Something stupid like that, right? Like, and then Braun's just like, okay, and
just
puts foot on him and pins him, right? Yeah, like that's the kind of stuff I could see them coming up with. And in that respect, it will be entertaining and different. But you need to think outside the box on this, because if you start to think about this the same way you think about other titles, or that it actually means something or it's relevant, like AEW is going to want you to do with all these wins and losses and statistics on pay-per-views and stuff, they're going to use this as fuel for their fire, but it's not the same. It's not even in the same ballpark. It's not, it's just a completely different thing. Speaking of AEW, I don't know if you're planning on watching it. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get to watch this thing, but we got Double or Nothing coming up this weekend. And we talked a lot to Chris Van Vliet about AEW and WWE and all that kind of stuff. Are you going to try to check out the pay-per-view?
Yeah, I'm going to try and find a way to watch it. I think as a wrestling fan, everyone should try and watch it. I think it's $50, right? US probably.
Yeah, I saw something today about DirecTV or Bleacher Report Live, $49.95 or something.
Right. So, I mean, it's steep for a company that's done nothing yet. But I will say this, I don't think their pay-per-views are going to be monthly. I think they're going to be like quarterly. So if you're paying $50 every 3 or 4 months, let's say, it's not as bad as paying, like WWE used to be like $60 a month. So.
Well, yeah. I mean, and there was a point when WrestleMania was on pay-per-view. It was like 70-something bucks or something. Yeah. I think it was crazy high. The reason I bring it up is because we watched, and I know that you wrote an article on it, and I watched it the other day, the match between Adam Hangman Page and Pac on YouTube. They released that match because of the fact that it is not happening at Double or Nothing. Did you get a chance to watch that match?
Yeah, I did. I watched it about half hour after they showed it. Good match.
Good match. Yeah, interesting finish. And going into before I had watched it and hearing that Pac was no longer going to be at Double or Nothing, I was kind of leaning towards, oh man, okay, this is already a problem for AEW, like creative differences. This guy hasn't even done a pay-per-view yet. Is he even under contract with AEW? He's
not coming already. Terms? Yeah.
Right. Like AEW is bragging about this whole, we might not even have scripted promos and we want to give our guys creative freedom a little bit. Well, that's what killed WCW. So I don't think they're even remotely thinking about giving that kind of creative freedom to people. But if you're having issues already with guys that you're bringing in and don't want to lose, I think the rumor here is that he was going to lose he's going to beat Page and then go on to face Kenny Omega and lose to Omega. Yeah. And he did not want to do that. And so what was the point in having Page lose if you're not going to get the payoff of Pac versus Omega later? And so that's why they said, well, we're not going to do that then. And that's why AEW pulled the plug on it. But it's interesting, right, to see that they've worked their way. And I thought it was a very creative way to work their way around it. Like, they put it on YouTube for people to see and sample what those matches might look like. I thought that was creative. I thought it was good. I don't know what the status is of Pac in AEW, so that'll be interesting to find out. But one of the reasons I'm bringing up the AEW stuff is because on SmackDown we saw Dolph Ziggler. And I'm curious to see where Ziggler's at. You talk about Pac in AEW. What's Ziggler and WWE's situation look like? Like, last I heard, he was like on a lengthy hiatus. I don't even know if he's under contract with WWE. And if he is, like, for how long? Is this just a temporary thing? Like a Saudi Arabia payoff? Like, what's happening here, right? Like, I was very curious. What did you think of his return last night? Shocking?
Yeah, so I'll start with Pac real quick. I think that the fact that he said, like, after the match, I'm not going. Obviously, this was done having known that he wasn't going to be wrestling Paige at Double Nothing and whatever. So the fact that he came out, he's like, I'm not even going to go to AEW. My work here is done, blah, blah, blah. That means that they're not on bad terms, at the very least. It means that they're like, hey, well, we're not going to do this, so let's find a way around it. Pac, you're okay with doing this? Yes, great, awesome. The reason he didn't want to lose is because he hasn't lost in, like, 2 years, right? So for him, it's a matter of keeping that going and keeping his gimmick going. So I don't think it was really as bad as people think it is. I know that for a lot of people, it's, okay, so you didn't want to do 205 Live. You didn't want to lose. You didn't want, so, like, why are you being a diva about it? You know, diva in the sense of, like, you know, your way or no way, not in a bad way like WWE makes diva seem, which, again, diva's never been a bad thing. So I think that them making that a bad term is stupid. But in general, he's just been very, you know, like no red M&Ms, or like red M&Ms only kind of thing, you know? So at this point, I think Pac and AEW, they just had different ideas for where they wanted to go with it, and they, you know, amicably figured it out. So good. That's awesome for both sides, and realizing, hey, let's not do something stupid here, let's not, like, be rash about it. So good on them. Already better than WCW ever did.
Well, yeah, and I think once his Dragon Gate stuff is done and he's over with that title and it goes to somebody else, he will wind up in AEW. I have no doubt about that.
Right. As for Ziggler, that's awesome. Like, I think Ziggler is one of the most underrated talents in wrestling history, because he can just go on the mic, he can go in the ring, he's got the character work, he can go as a babyface or a heel, but man, is he ever a good heel. He's still got the same character he had before he left, which, I mean, I like Chris Jericho's thing of, like, constantly switching things up, but not everyone can do it. So for Ziggler to be like this, you know, why are you not talking about me thing, I think it's great. I think he got a really passionate promo as well after he attacked Kingston. And seeing him, he must be under contract to have the match against Kingston at the Saudi Arabia show. And I think that's happening because I don't know for sure, but I think I read somewhere that Kevin Owens, he refuses to go to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I heard that too.
I didn't read into why, so don't quote me on this.
I think it's Sami Zayn related.
I was going to say, I would say it's probably Sami Zayn related, right? Because he can't go there because of Syrian descent. So that's, you know, a lot of people have had that. John Cena in the past, Daniel Bryan in the past. Now we have Kevin Owens for various reasons that don't want to go to Saudi Arabia. I don't blame them at all. I think that WWE is really towing a fine line here of, you know, moral and ethical dilemmas, but that's on them. It's a big money deal, so I guess for Vince, it's, hey, let's just take the money where we can get it.
Well, it's also a situation I don't think they can easily back out of. Like, I don't know if Vince would. Like, it's a lot of money, right? So maybe he wouldn't anyway. But if he felt like he was really like, oh crap, I got to get out of this, I don't think he can. I think he's committed to this 10-year contract deal, and they would be all over him if he backed out of it. So he's just going to have to try to make hay out of this for the length of this term, and he's got a lot of time left. So he can only just hope that they don't get worse. And from what I've read and I'm understanding, it is going to get worse. There's some stuff going on in Saudi Arabia that's coming up here that doesn't look good. So it's it's an awkward situation. But I think the Ziggler thing is why I was going there is I think it's temporary. Like, yeah, I think he's under contract too, but I just don't know what kind of term it is. I don't think this is going to last past Saudi Arabia. Like, I think he goes in. I think he goes in. I think he loses, and then the minute they come back, it's Kevin Owens again.
That's fair. I would like it to be Ziggler. I think Ziggler would be a nice, fresh spin on things, and he really hasn't had that time on top. He had the Money in the Bank win and the world title win technically 2 reigns because he got awarded the championship once, but he's never really had that opportunity to show what he can do, and I would love to see it. And I think people forget too, Big E was part of that stable with Ziggler at the time, right? Big E and AJ Lee. So
Well, that's where I was going to go with you next. There are some conspiracy theories, and I don't even know if you want to call them conspiracy theories at this point. It's just people projecting possibilities that Big E is related to all this. Like if you watched SmackDown last night, he was, down on the ground. I got my injured knee. No one saw how it happened, and he's got that connection to Ziggler. Yeah. Well, you'd have to really trace back a long way because New Day has been together for a long time now. That is if that's the plant and that's the seed that Big E and Ziggler are working together, and some people are saying that they had this plan hatched out for a long. I don't know how believable that is. Like, you're telling me that Big E's been in New Day for years and he's just been doing it so that he can get back together with Ziggler at some point. I don't buy that. But maybe the connection of, well, Ziggler was my old running buddy. I got some issues with New Day. I'm not getting my, time either. And this is the way you want to turn Big E. Well, maybe. I don't know that New Day is ready for a breakup yet, but I'm not sour on the idea of teasing, that Big E might eventually turn. Do you think there's something to that? That's what some people are talking about right now.
I didn't even know that was actually a conspiracy theory. I wasn't even suggesting it, but yeah, I mean, that sounds great to me. I would wager that there's a 99% chance that does not happen.
Yeah, well, I think that WWE is very much on the New Day train still, and I think if you've got Kofi Kingston as your champion, with all three of those guys back working they were entertaining last night. Like when they came out and they were talking to Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn about, what are we going to get you after all your time away? And it was like they were singing nothing, they're entertaining as a trio, right? So until they're not entertaining anymore, I'm sure WWE will probably keep them together. But to drop hints that maybe there's some potential of a Big E turn at some point, I'm okay with that. But yeah, yes, it was talked about on social media last night a little bit that, people were making the connections. I just saw a bunch of gifs and pictures of Big E and Ziggler walking around together from their old days, right? Like hinting, oh, hey, maybe there's something to this, right? So it'll be interesting. We talked a little bit about the 24/7 championship. When we interviewed Chris van Vliet, there was no 24/7 championship.
Right.
One of the things he talked about, and people will hear in this interview, was the brand split stuff. Do you think this is another example of this brand split just going away?
Yeah. So Chris, I mean, we talked about like Chris's opinion on the brand split and our opinion on the brand split, and you'll hear about that later. And this just seems like not due to Vince McMahon's desire, but due to NBC and Fox's desire. It looks like the brand split is just going to slowly fade away into nothing. It already has. So. Well,
yeah, that's why I'm asking, because I just watched from Raw and SmackDown this week, which I enjoyed both shows. I mean, it was basically a crossover week. Like, just people were on both shows the whole time. Yeah. Like, I already feel like there's no wildcard rule anymore. Like, within 1 week, 2 weeks, I'm feeling like, well, this is just a mixed show again, right? It didn't have that whole, oh my God, he's migrated from Raw to SmackDown. It's such a shocker. Like, people are just being announced in their pre-matches. Like, what was it, Charlotte and Lacey Evans versus Lynch and Bayley last night? I mean, shoot, those are 2 wildcard people coming over. They didn't even talk about, oh, who's it going to be? They just put their graphic up before the match and said, oh, well, I guess there's 2 of our 4, right? Or like, it's not even doing it anymore, right? So I'm under the impression that this is just not going to last. This is one of those things where the wild card rule is just going to become, oh, hey, there's no brand split anymore.
Yeah, I would say so.
All right. Well, yeah. I mean, is there anything else we're missing? I mean, there's not Sean Spears. Dillinger has joined AEW. That was a little bit of news that came out last night. His non-compete ends about 48 hours before Double or Nothing, so he's going to be in the Battle Royal at that pay-per-view. Any other news that we sort of should touch on before we air this Chris van Vliet interview?
So actually, I did something pretty interesting yesterday. I was with my friend. He went to check out a pro wrestling dojo, like a wrestling school / gym, and it's run by a wrestler goes by Drew Onyx. He's wrestled, on television, local things. He was in Japan with the class of like Finn Balor and Carl Anderson and them. So that was cool. I saw that. I got to check out the entire class and see the work they did with like in-ring psychology and just movement and certain things and building on not like promos but like in-match work and just how things are all developed. And it was pretty basic stuff, but it was really interesting to see it all just come together. And I definitely want to do some kind of feature on him and maybe, or I think school, and maybe at some point have him on the podcast. So that's something that he sounded interesting in, and I'm just springing this on you now for the first time. But it was really cool, and I thought that
Cool.
it would be cool to shed some light on it and give people an idea of what goes on behind the scenes and learning how to be a wrestler, and the manager work and the referee and like the best way to incorporate everything, like every little detail into a match.
That'll be cool. No, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That'll be awesome. Well, let's get on to the Chris Van Vliet interview, but we'll end it here for you and me. Let's tell people where they can hear us. We're on Anchor.fm, a number of other podcast platforms, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, all those platforms. It would be tremendously helpful for people to listen to it, subscribe to it, share it, download it, comment on it. Tell us we got one of our ratings here already on Apple Podcasts, and we appreciate the guy who did it. It wasn't a perfect 5 out of 5, but it was pretty darn close, and we're happy that we got that. So thank you very much for doing that. So do listen to it and share it and help us grow this thing. You can catch us. Where can they catch us? They can catch us on Twitter at Wrestler Write-Ups, WrestlingWriteUps.com. TheSportster.com is the producer of the show, so you can check out a lot of our articles there, and the podcast will be there. And on Facebook at Wrestling Write-Ups. And every week we'll put it on the Facebook page at thesportster.com too. So, yeah, buddy, thank you. Let's put the Chris Van Vliet interview on for people to listen to. And then until next week, I'll chat with you then.
Yes, talk later, man.
Okay, thanks, guys. It's another edition of the Smart Marks of Wrestling podcast presented by thesportster.com. Enjoy the Chris Van Vliet interview. Good, and you know what? I'm really excited about this week because we have a very special guest. We've got Chris Van Vliet on with us. He's on the other line. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Jim Brandon, thanks for having me on.
We appreciate you coming. I know a lot of our listeners know who you are because you have a YouTube channel that is uber successful in terms of interviewing superstars, not just from WWE, but all walks of life in the wrestling business. I have to ask you before we get really going, how did you get into this? Like, I know that you're a TV host, and you're out in Florida right now, but where did the whole wrestling thing come from?
Well, first of all, I got to say it's awesome catching up with some fellow Canadians. So that's a great thing about this podcast. So thank you for that. To answer your question, it kind of happened kind of by accident. I mean, I'm a TV host, and I have been in Toronto, Vancouver. From there, I went to I was in Peterborough. I was in Cleveland, and now I'm in Miami. And the cool thing about being on television, you get a lot of access. I interview a lot of celebrities. It's just part of my job. I review movies, and wrestling's just kind of become a byproduct of that. And as a massive wrestling fan, when the big shows would come to town, when Raw and SmackDown and Impact and Ring of Honor would come to town, I'd just reach out to them and say, hey, which superstar, which wrestler is doing an interview? Can we do one? And that's how it kind of all started. And when you work for a TV news station, you're only putting like one tiny little soundbite of your interview on TV. So I figured I've had like a 10, 15, 20-minute interview with this person, and I'm asking them questions as a fan that I'm interested in, and we're only airing, 20, 30 seconds of it. I just feel like someone else needs to see this. So the idea was I would just throw this up on my YouTube channel, which at the time had like 4 subscribers. I was just throwing it up there, hoping like someone else would, get the joy out of these answers that I was getting. And that was kind of how it all started. And I think that my channel started in 2011. And it was in 2012, I interviewed The Miz. He was about to throw out the first pitch for the Cleveland Indians. And I just did a quick little interview with him. And at the time, CM pipe bomb. And Miz said in the interview, it's the most exciting time since the Attitude Era. And someone somehow found this on my YouTube channel that had 4 subscribers. And I woke up the next day and it had 6,000 views, which had never happened to me before. And then I woke up the day after that and I had 36,000 views. And I'm like, wow, like, other people enjoy this. And that's kind of how it started. And, whenever wrestlers would come to town after that, I'd do the odd one here or there with the intention that it would go on my YouTube channel. But it wasn't until this last maybe year or two that I really started making those specific goals that like I was going to go out of my way, seek out these interviews, build those connections, and try to do as many of these as I can.
That's really cool. But I want to clarify one quick thing. There's a lot of us that do podcasts, and there's guys that do websites and things like that. Just so that I'm clear, when you first did your interview, your very first interview with The Miz, did you get that interview because of the fact that you were working for a TV station, or did you get that interview by digging? Like, did you just go out on your own as a solo and say, I want to talk to this guy, and somehow you got that interview? Like, how would you go about describing that worked itself out? Like, was it because of your connection in the TV space, or because you were just a grinder?
Yeah, definitely because of my connection in TV. And Miz wasn't my first wrestling interview. It was just my first like real, big one. I think before that I did something with Jack Swagger. My very first interview was Bobby Lashley in 2007. I was hosting a show in Vancouver for Razor, which was also our show also aired on City TV. And it was because of, you have the in of like, I'm on a TV station, I'm a broadcaster, and that was kind of the in. And now that like the broadcasting landscape has changed so much that I feel like more people are able to watch my interviews on YouTube than they would be even if I put it on my TV station now.
Yeah, so I mean, that's huge, obviously. Like you said, getting that one opportunity where you're able to kind of get the in, and then from there, I mean, your videos just start to blow up, right? All these interviews and all these opportunities. At this point, then, do you find that you have like equal amount of people seeking you out, that you are like seeking them out actively, or do you think it's still you seeking people out more for interviews?
Oh yeah, it's me seeking people out like 98% of the time. And it's me like grinding, it's me going, all right, so this person is going to be in this city, and that's 3 hours away from me. But if we could get an interview with Jack Swagger, before his MMA fight, that'd be great. So I drove 3.5 hours up there to do an interview with him. And I've been doing a lot of that. And it's just kind of like looking at the calendar, seeing the opportunities. And I think the biggest advice I can give to you guys or to anyone else that's trying to build this from the ground up is you have to provide value for that person, because time is the most important thing that any of us have. And if you're asking for 20 or 30 minutes or, sometimes 40 or 50, even an hour of someone's time, you've got to be able to tell them right off the bat what they're getting in exchange for this. Obviously, you're getting a big get. You're getting a great interview with a big name talent. What are they getting? And it's important for you to put that out there, whether it's, the amount of views you can get or whatever it is, whatever value you provide. I think that's an important thing to put.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, what you're providing them is just a different kind of outlet or platform that they might not have in in WWE or wherever they are, right? So I think that's a good way to look at it too.
Yeah, and it's, I'm super fortunate that my videos are getting a lot of views right now. And last week I uploaded an interview with Rhino, and it was the first and only interview he's done talking about his plans to leave WWE when his contract's up. And it was through a mutual friend. He reached out to me and said, I want to get my story out there. I want to do a long interview, and I want to do it with someone I can trust. And I heard you're the guy. And I'm like, oh my God, wow. Yeah, let's make this happen. And I took the day off of work, booked a flight to Detroit. Rhino picked me up at the airport. How cool is that? And I spent 8 hours in Michigan. I got an interview with Rhino and an interview with Zach Gallen while I was there, and then right back to the airport and flew back here.
Convenient timing, getting 2 for 1.
Right. Well, I kind of made it happen. I'm like, if I'm here, I might as well try it.
Very cool. Now, that leads me to an interesting question, because Rhino was one of those guys that, is leaving WWE, and it's now public that he is doing that. And whether or not, I'm not sure if that was broken on your channel or not, or what have you, but that leads me to an important question. When you talk to these guys, especially guys that are moving on, how much do you find that they're willing to talk to you about what's really going on? I mean, we're in an age right now with AEW coming up, and there's a lot of controversy around WWE and some unhappy people there. I don't know if Rhino was unhappy or if he just chose it was time to do something else. But how much do you find that these guys are really willing to just talk to you?
Well, I never want to put someone in an awkward position. Like, I'm never asking like the gotcha questions that are going to, make someone squirm or feel awkward. Like, these people are my guest, and I want them to feel welcome. And I would certainly love to have them come back and have their friends come back. So, usually before the interview, I'll say, is there anything you can't talk about? Or, hey, I'm going to ask you about, your contract or whatever. Like, is there a certain way that you want me to approach this or whatever? Because I don't want to like screw them over. I want to, ask interesting, important questions. And, I want to know the things that other fans want to know. But I also don't want to, make this person angry at me. So, like Chris Jericho is a great example. The last interview I did with him was just a couple of days after AEW, and it was still a bit of after he announced that he was going to be with AEW, and it was still a bit of a sticky situation with him and WWE because he had basically said he was never going to work for another wrestling promotion ever, and here he is signing this 3-year deal with AEW. And I said, is there anything you don't want to talk about? He's like, just ask me on camera. It's like, don't waste all your good stuff, Junior. And I'm like,
that's so good.
All right. And, someone like him or any other veteran that's been around for 15, 20, 30 years, this isn't the first time they've been asked, tough questions. They know how to dance around it. And they know how to give, the answers that will be truthful, but not get them in trouble.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because before we even got on the air with you, I was talking with Jim, and I basically said, no matter what we ask you, Chris, you're the kind of guy who, this is what you do, right? You're going to be good on your feet, and no matter what we ask you, you can kind of, directly tell us something while also skirting an issue if there's something you can't answer. So I thought that talking to someone like you with Jericho is the perfect storm almost because, again, Jericho has that experience not only in wrestling but also just in every walk of life, including his own podcast, which is, massively successful. So like you said, when you just know.
Yeah, and look, and when you're talking to like someone like me, I don't have any like secrets. There's nothing controversial that I could say or that you could ask me. And even if I did say something controversial, I don't really think too many people would care. But I appreciate you guys, being sensitive to that if there was something that I maybe couldn't talk about, but there isn't.
Well, right. Okay, let's dance around a little bit then. One of the things I'm curious about when you talk to these guys, they'll say what they say, but you get the chance to really get to know them a little bit. You get the chance to get the vibe from them and the feeling. With what is going on right now in WWE and the talk around how many people might be unhappy, we only know what we know, and that's not really all that much. So when you talk to these guys, what's the vibe you're getting? Are you feeling like a lot of these guys are frustrated? Are they, happy they're just misunderstood? They want more opportunities? Like, are you getting a general vibe from a lot of the people that you're talking to that things are just not necessarily okay, or that people are really happy, they just wish they were on TV more or having more opportunities? Like, what's the vibe you get?
Well, I think it depends on who you're talking to. Because, like, when I talked to John Cena, there's a guy who couldn't be happier with his position. But then when I talked to, like, the club, I talked to Anderson and Gallows, they made like a little like kind of comment on the side, like, I said something about like, oh, when did the club officially like disband? And he's like, I don't know. Guess when they took us off TV, it did. And I'm like, wow. And I'm like, it'd be cool like if we had a storyline where, we could have said goodbye to it or whatever. And he's like, yeah, that would be great. We just would need to be on TV to make that happen. And it's like, I get it. I think there's two trains of thought on this one. And the whole thing with Rhino was they were going to offer him more than double his salary to basically sit at home and just be on the shelf and be unavailable to AEW and Impact and Ring of Honor. And he said, no, I want to wrestle. And if that's the deal you're offering me, I'm going to let my deal expire and I'm going to go wrestle. So I think the thing, like when you talk to someone like him, and Rhino is by no means disgruntled. He had nothing but great things to say about WWE. I think the thing is like, if you're not being used, you've got two options here. You can either sit back and make some good money, know that you're in the WWE. It's the dream for most wrestlers. Or you can go take a chance on yourself and get out there and go work the independents, maybe get hired by a Ring of Honor or an Impact or possibly AEW. And you just got to ask yourself, what makes you happy? What drives you and what makes you fulfilled at the end of the day? Is it being able to go, I made a whole bunch of money this year? Or is it going, I'm really proud of the match that I had last night and the match I'm going to have, this weekend?
I have a follow-up question. I have two questions, actually. This is Jim here. The Rhino stuff, did he say why they're not using him? Like when he says, I want to wrestle, like I get it. You're going to give me a lot of money and I'm happy that you're doing that. But like, did they say why he wasn't using him? Like, is there an impression here in WWE that they just don't have time for certain people and they're all about like the Goldbergs of the world or the whatever? Like, did he give you any indication as to why they weren't going to use him?
He was saying that they're cycling talent. And I guess, I think that there's your main 5 or 10 stars, and then everyone else just kind of gets cycled around. And I think when you're a Rhino who's, supremely talented in the ring, but, there really isn't a lot for him storyline wise right now. He's a guy who could unfortunately be easily forgotten if you're not in storylines every single week. So he just said that they're cycling through. And if I had to guess, Rhino didn't say this, but if I had to guess, they offered him a big contract so that he doesn't sign with someone like AEW.
Well, I was just going to say, he can't be the only one, right? Like, there's got to be a number of people who, WWE says they're not worried about it, and everybody says, oh, they shouldn't be worried about it. But, they got to be worried about it, aren't they?
Well, I don't know if they're worried specifically about AEW and AEW's product. I think they might be worried about the perception of a whole bunch of their guys showing up on AEW programming. Although when I talked to Tony Khan, he made it pretty clear that he's not interested in just picking up the scraps. And I think that we've seen that happen in the past with TNA, and it's just not a good look when you go, oh, that guy's contract's over or ending. Let's take him and we'll make him our big star. And I think we saw that happen in TNA. It didn't really work that well. So I think that these big contracts are just being thrown around so that WWE merchandise, quote unquote, if you will, in their talent doesn't show up in other places, and they go, oh yeah, AEW is serious. They just got Gallows and Anderson, or they just got Shinsuke Nakamura, or whoever it is that they got.
So in a way, they just don't want it to look like the floodgates are opening and everybody's leaving, kind of is what you're saying.
That's what I think. But look, AEW has been the talk of the wrestling world since they announced that they were going to be, doing their thing on January 1st when they announced that they were a company. We've been talking about them nonstop ever since. I'm really interested to see what happens at Double or Nothing, because, that's going to be them really making a statement about, we're AEW and this is what our product looks like. I just think that as a fan, I'm super excited, but I feel like I'm also a little bit cautious about everyone's thinking that they're going to be like the Messiah that's going to swoop in and, they're going to solve all of our problems in the wrestling world. And maybe they will. I think they're going to provide a really interesting alternative, but in the same way that we complain about Raw and SmackDown and the pay-per-views every single week, I think we're going to be, we're going to find issue with AEW's product too. And that's not to say it's bad. It's just, it's not going to be perfect for everybody.
Yeah, the way I look at AEW right now is I kind of see it as, people are saying that, and this isn't AEW, they seem to specifically be saying they're not going to be competing with WWE directly. But I think that's true because I feel like they want to be more of, the independent wrestling company that's bigger than the other independent wrestling companies, whereas WWE wants to be more that entertainment side of it, right? Yeah. So I think that AEW just wants to be more the wrestling side. But if you had to, put a wager on it, would you say that they're going to do, more successful than TNA, for example, or are they going to be kind of in the same class as the TNA?
I think it depends on what the timeline is, because if you look at excitement right now, they're already they've leapfrogged TNA and New Japan and Ring of Honor, and they're already the number 2 company without even having 1 second of one match. So that's really interesting, right? Yeah. I think that in the perception of it, they're already more successful than TNA. But we'll have to see.
Yeah, that's fair.
We don't even know what day of the week their TV show is going to be on. We don't know if it's going to be live. We don't know if it's an hour, 2 hours, or I hope to God not, but maybe 3 hours.
Yeah. Hey, they're going to go 4 hours. They're going to really give us something to watch every week.
So, it's all speculation. Now, it's super fun to look ahead, and, it's the most exciting time it's been to be a wrestling fan, I think, right now, because of what the unknown is. But we have something that we haven't had in a while, and we have hope. We have hope.
Yes.
I have a personal opinion question for you. One of the things, I don't know if you saw the interview, but Cody Rhodes was talking about, we talk a little bit about the AEW product, and we don't know what it's going to look like and how they're going to separate themselves from WWE. One of the things that was asked of them was, are they going to have scripted promos? And I think his answer was, if we have even one, I'll be shocked. That's quite different from what we know or have heard is going on in WWE right now. And I watched the interview that you did with John Cena just before WrestleMania. And one of the things that I took away from that interview that I thought was very cool was how he described in great detail and I'll use his words, how they get shit, and you have to turn it into something that you can work with as a performer. Now, that is exactly what AEW is going to be promoting by not having these scripted promos. What do you think works better? Are you on the train of, yeah, let these guys do their thing, they're good at it, and so let them have it? Or do you need more structure and the writers need to be more involved? Because that's the big criticism right now. And I don't think we want to blame the writers necessarily, but the big, harping on WWE right now is that the writing is really bad. So what would you do?
Well, I think that this idea of no scripted promos is just, it's what happens every single weekend at every indie show across the country, across the world. It's the promoter goes, all right, they give you the basis of it. It's almost like improv, it's like, all right, so here's what I'm thinking. You're upset with this guy because of this thing and this thing. And, maybe throw in this word or that word, take it from there. You know what your character can do. You know what your character would say. I think that's what Cody means. And I don't mean to put words in his mouth, but if I had to assume, they're not just going to go, all right, MJF, go out there. Like, they'll give him some direction, I think.
Of course, yes.
But that's what makes these guys so great. That's why Joey Janela and MJF and the Bucks and Cody and, the list goes on and on and on of all these incredibly talented people that are now in AEW. That's why they're so good, is because they know their character in and out. I can't imagine. Can you imagine if you were a wrestling promoter and you hired someone like Joey Ryan, who's an indie darling and, knows his character so well? If you said to Joey Ryan, all right, we've got this program you're going to be doing tonight with this other wrestler, and I printed out this 2-page script for you for this promo. He would look at that script, crumple it up, and laugh in your face, because you don't know the character better than they do. And if I had to guess, that's what Cody's saying. They know the characters well. They'll give you some direction, and you go from there.
So it's also kind of like a very old school wrestling vibe too, which obviously Cody grew up with, where you call it in the ring. So you have kind of direction of where you want things to go. Even promos where you're told, hey, this is what your storyline is. Now go out there and do something with it. But I mean, nowadays everything is so scripted and so pre-produced that it really isn't that same vibe. But I mean, NXT seems to be a little different in that regard, where I don't know if it's so much the wrestlers themselves or if it's the source material or whatever it is. But what's your take on the fact that the rumors that Vince McMahon doesn't even know the NXT guys before he sees them on WWE TV?
I think that's probably accurate, unfortunately. NXT is certainly, has the freedom that I think we all wish we could see in WWE. And maybe this is, a sign of things to come. If and when Vince finally does pass things over to Triple H and Steph, maybe we'll see a product that looks a little bit more like NXT, because the reins are off in the matches and the promos and everything. It just has a completely different, indie type of feel to it.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a Vince McMahon thing? I'm going to just come right out and ask it. That's the big thing right now, is that some people are all over the fact that he just doesn't. He's getting older. He's been at this for a really long time. He's really old school. The business is changing. NXT is different than WWE is. AEW is different than, or we think will be different than NXT and WWE. Is it just he's not quite there? I mean, he's a genius. The guy's has changed the business for what we know and have known for the last 30, 40 years. But is it time that somebody else, like a Triple H or something, takes the reins here?
Well, I mean, Triple H, he seems to be getting more and more control every single year. And if WWE's main products, Raw and SmackDown, could be, just a little bit like NXT, I think that it would make us as wrestling fans really happy. But I think there's a real distinction here to be made between wrestling fans and WWE fans. And, there's a really big difference there. And there still is a whole bunch of people all across the world that don't know anything outside of what they see on Monday and Tuesday night. Like, that to them is wrestling. And, some of those people, unfortunately, will look at a product like an NXT or the Ring of Honor or an indie federation and go, I don't like that. That's not for me. And that's okay. Everyone has, a different flavor of ice cream, and that's okay.
Yeah, there are some people that think that, the top 20 superstars in WWE are better than, the top 5 superstars in any other company on the planet, which, I mean, we know isn't true, specifically because WWE keeps picking up superstars from other companies for a reason. There are definitely top stars out there, the Kenny Omegas of the world, the Okadas of the world, who are still very much on top of their game. But I want to go back to Triple H real quick, and he always had that kind of reputation of, and among the fans more than anything, about being like someone who buries talent, so to speak. But what are your thoughts now on, like, everyone's calling him the savior, right? Everyone wants him to be in charge of the entire company. Where's that 180 come from, and what are your thoughts on that?
Maybe it's just him getting more control and more power. I don't know. Like, I had an interesting discussion with Justin Roberts, the former ring announcer from WWE, and it just seemed like he wrote a book about it. And in his book, he talks about how Triple H just didn't like him and just had it out for him for whatever reason. And then when Triple H got control of NXT, he's like, he was just a completely different guy. He was happy and proud of these guys, and he's like, but still so mean to me and making these like asshole-ish comments all the time, and like wouldn't even look me in the eye when he would speak to me. And this is all the stuff that Justin wrote in his book, and he's just like, something about him being in NXT has just like changed him. I don't know, maybe him being a father's changed him. I know that has that effect on a lot of people.
Well, I've got 2 kids, and I know exactly what it feels like to be a completely different person after you have kids. It's an amazing experience that changes your life completely. What's your take on the rumors and speculation right now that he might be the most frustrated guy in WWE? I mean, there's some talk that that he feels really bad for these NXT guys that are getting called up and they're not getting used properly, and they don't know the characters, and they're being thrown together, or they're not being used week after week. I mean, do you think there's anything to that?
There probably is. If everyone else is frustrated, or there's a lot of people that are frustrated in WWE, I can't see why he would be any different from that. And I imagine there's lots of storylines or ideas that he has, and obviously the buck stops with Vince, and if Vince going to roll with it, so that probably gets frustrating after a while. If I had to take a stab at this.
Yeah, it seems kind of like he's going from, like you said, Justin Roberts always said that he was kind of a jerk at times, or apparently the entire time he spoke to him or knew him. But it could also come down to Triple H seeing the other side of the coin, and like his self-interest was, number one when he was a superstar. But now that he's looking up to somebody else and having to say, "Hey, I want to do this," and Vince says, "Great," and then he gives the guy to Vince, and Vince says, "Well, who's this guy?" So now Triple H kind of sees the other side of it, where your self-interest is fine, but somebody else is still calling the shots, so you don't have full power. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. And I don't think we can look at Vince as like, I don't think he's trying to hold the product back. Like, you've got to think that he's doing everything with the best intentions in mind.
Sure.
And just because, we might disagree with the way he's doing things doesn't mean that he doesn't see, some sort of value in it. He's built this company into the multi-billion-dollar company it is by taking these chances and, doing the things he's doing. So it'd be pretty hard to argue with a billionaire, when we don't even have 1/1000th of his money.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously no way he's tanking his own company, and he's obviously doing what he thinks is best. But it's still an interesting conversation when he has to see what's happening behind the scenes and everything. But let's kind of spin the gears again back towards just interviewing in general. You've done a lot of these interviews. What would you say is the worst one you've ever done? If you want to, I don't know if you want to name names or anything, but.
I mean, I'd say that for the most part, these celebrity interviews, wrestling interviews, just interviews in general, they're most of the time pretty good. Like, they understand they're on camera. They understand they're being recorded. For the most part, they have something to promote, whether it's a movie or a book or, an album if they're an artist. But I did an interview with Matt Sydal, Heaven Born. And if you look at it in my YouTube channel, it's just strange. And I'm not saying that he was on something, but if you watch the interview, there's like a couple moments where he's like ferociously like rubbing his face, and I'm like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, I'm fine." So that was just a strange one. I guess that would fall into once you see this, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And that falls into a category of just like, all right, I think we'll end this, quickly and kind of move on from here.
Well, when we're done here, we're just going to go immediately look that one up, right?
You better. Yeah.
As if I'm not already looking it up. Okay.
It falls apart very quickly. You'll see.
Well, when it throws you off, I mean, you got to figure out. I mean, like we said at the beginning, you're good on your feet and you know where you want to go. But at the same time, when they throw you a wrench like that, I mean, what do you do, right? If you could pick anybody that you could interview and you haven't yet, who would you pick?
Well, we just talked about him, and the dream interview is Vince. I mean, imagine having 10, 15, 20 minutes. I mean, my interviews lately have been 30-ish minutes on YouTube. Imagine 30 minutes unconstrained, able to ask Vince anything you want. I mean, that would be unbelievable. I highly doubt that this would actually happen, but I'm going to keep putting that out into the world and hope maybe that one day it happens. I will take Triple H as a consolation prize, though, which I think is actually very attainable. I'll take that as a consolation prize if Vince is unavailable.
Do you have any idea how you think that interview would go? I mean, we've seen Vince McMahon interviews, some that go well and some that don't go well at all. Can you imagine what that would be like if you ever got that opportunity? Would you be worried about stepping on toes and saying that one thing that would just set him off like we've seen happen before?
I think I come to every interview and every just situation in life with, a lot of respect for the person I'm speaking with. And I have nothing but respect for Vince McMahon anyway. So I hope that would, kind of be coming off of me as I'm speaking with him. I don't know. I would hope to not piss him off, like that famous clip we just saw on John Oliver, where he flips the papers in the reporter's face. Yeah. I would have to imagine that in that interview, Vince probably gave some guidelines of like, okay, we can talk about this, but let's not talk about this, and this. And I would have to think that that's why he got that reaction there.
Right. I just looked up the video. That was like 2 years ago. I remember watching that video when you posted it. So that's actually really funny. I saw the door like in the hallway and I recognized it immediately. So
yeah. Oh, wow. That's funny. That's funny that you saw it. Well, you can refresh your memory of how interesting it was.
I can even see you saying, I didn't listen with audio, obviously, but I can see you asking, like, you okay? Like, you good?
Yeah.
You brought up a very interesting point that I'd like to ask you about, because you said something about, having the vibe come off of you that, you have respect for the people that you're interviewing. And I know that you're a wrestling fan, so obviously that would probably shine through as you're talking to people. But one of the things that we are learning very quickly, we have a brand new website that we're trying to build and a brand new podcast that we're trying to promote. We're on social media. And one of the things that I'm finding as we're going through and we're building this platform up is that there is a lot of negativity. There's a ton of people who think that it is a good idea to anger others in an attempt to get notoriety, if that's what we want to call it. Now, you mentioned Vince McMahon maybe going off because he probably had some guidelines and that interviewer probably strayed from those guidelines. What would you say to somebody who's doing an interview or who is looking to aspire to greater heights and get more contacts and get more stuff? Like, is there an approach that, I mean, obviously I can imagine that you would agree with us that going in there and trying to anger somebody is not the way to do it. But is there something or advice that you would give to say, this is how I like to approach my interviews. This is what I'm thinking about when I'm talking to these people. And this is what has worked really well for me in the past.
Well, I go into every interview like it's a conversation, like it's a discussion. Like if I were to run into this person as a guest at a wedding or something, or I was at a party, like what kind of conversation will we have? It wouldn't be like, I am going to ask you a question and you are going to answer that question, which is unfortunately what a lot of people do. I just want to try to have a conversation, find some common ground, and see where the conversation goes. If you go into an interview and you're trying on purpose to make someone mad, or you're asking clickbaity type questions, it's probably going to be one of the last interviews you ever do anyway. So if that is going to be your technique and you're all in on that, that's fine. Just know that you're going to look like a dick and you're probably not going to get to any other interviews after that, because the wrestling world is insanely small and wrestlers are all friends with each other at least probably by 1 degree of separation. If you get this reputation for yourself, it's not going to be good for you, and it's going to be a very short-lived career, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, asking questions is great, like you said, and kind of keeping the ball rolling. But when you have a whole robotic thing and it's very scripted, going back to that conversation, I guess, it gets difficult sometimes to keep a natural flow going. And I think for us, this is unscripted, but we have kind of questions in mind. But keeping it light is really just it's the way to go, I think, and making it seem where both parties, or in this case all three parties, are just relaxed, and there's nothing, no ulterior motive, no like end game result. We're just talking.
And that's the cool thing about these long form interviews. Like, podcasting has completely changed the game, because we can talk for an hour or two or three and just have a conversation. Whereas when you're doing these like movie interviews, like when I do a celebrity movie interview, it's like a 4-minute interview, and you've basically got 4 minutes. You'll probably ask 4, maybe 5 questions, and that's it. Like, there's no chance to really get to know someone or build a rapport, or let them know like where you're really coming from as a person. Whereas in these long form discussions, you can really start to dive into some stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you say that, then you have guys like Pete Rosenberg and Sam Roberts who have done this, on the radio and whatnot, and now they have a pretty prominent spot on WWE television. Is that something you would want to ever do if you were offered the opportunity to actually work with the company and be, on TV or on pre-shows or on the actual shows or whatever it may be?
If I could have a role like Sam and Peter have, absolutely. I think that'd be a really cool thing. And it would basically be the best part-time job ever. If I was like a backstage interviewer or ring announcer, that would change the game for me. I don't think I'd be able to do my YouTube channel anymore. I certainly wouldn't be able to have my TV job. So that's something I wouldn't be able to do. I'm under contract with my TV job, so that's not even really a possibility. But I think the thing I'd be worried about is when Sam does his interviews, he gets a lot of interviews. Sam gets way more access to WWE guys than I ever do, and it makes sense. I mean, he works for that company, but he can't really ask them anything that's even remotely controversial or interesting, because his job's on the line too. And the cool thing I have going for me right now, and maybe this would change if I signed with a company one day, but I'm an independent journalist. I'm not out for a network. I'm not out for a certain show or blog or podcast. I'm just me, and I've got my YouTube channel, which bears my name, and that's it. I don't have a dog in the fight, and I think that that's what makes my interviews so balanced.
Well, it's a really good point, because, one of the things that I noticed, and I don't know if it's happening or not, maybe I'm just seeing it, but Sam Roberts, for example, he's now on WWE programming, and he has sort of developed a character in a way. Yeah. Like he's trashing Dana Brooke, and he's talking about Bianca Belair, and I don't know that that's him. I think that that's probably a mandate or some sort of idea that he's running with as part of the product now in WWE. How concerning would that be? Like, does a guy like Sam Roberts worry that, he goes from, an interviewer, a podcaster, a video guy to now working with WWE? Does he lose his credibility in a way now that he's part of the WWE machine and he's following their agenda?
I don't know. Sam Roberts is the ultimate fan, and I'm sure he's loving every single second of this, as we would too. You're getting directives from creative to do this, and I think you'd be like, cool. So I grew up watching these heels on television, and now I get to be one?
Right.
Like, he's probably loving this. I don't know Sam well enough to speak for him, and I certainly don't want to, but I bet you he's enjoying this.
Do you think it'd be worrisome if he's I'm assuming that these guys and maybe announcers have a lot longer shelf life than the typical wrestler in-ring performer would. What if he wants to go back to it? Can he just come out and say, yeah, I was just part of what I was doing. I was a character, and now I'm just going to be me again? Is it easy as that, or do you cross a line once you start to work for a company like that?
I think it's WWE. Like, we can't take anything that happens there with characters very seriously. Like, I remember when we all hated Michael Cole because he was a heel for however long he was a heel, and then King had a heart attack next to him, and all of a sudden, like, you snap your fingers and Cole was a good guy again. It was like probably the best thing to happen to Cole's career. And there's still a lot of people that take issue with Michael Cole, and that's fine. If he's not your cup of tea, that's okay. I'm a really big fan of his style of broadcasting and his style of commentary. But I can see if people that don't realize that WWE is a television program, maybe taking what he said seriously or taking it to heart.
Yeah, the Michael Cole thing with Lawler having his heart attack. I remember I was a few rows back at the announcer table for that show, so that
No
was
way.
I didn't even get to see. There was actually, this is a side note, going to the Bell Center. That's the arena here in Montreal.
Yeah.
And for like, I don't know, 15 visits in a row, someone will get taken out on a stretcher. And it was
Jeez.
insane. I don't know what kind of bad luck I was bringing to the Bell Center, or if that was just a regular thing, but like, it was really weird.
Wow.
And you were saying people kind of like, they dislike Michael Cole. You like his broadcasting style. I think something that a lot of us forget when we watch him, everything is so very scripted for him, and Vince is in his ear constantly. And there are videos of him backstage, like just behind the scenes kind of thing, where he's in the announcer table, and he'll say like, "Oh, I said this like 3 times. Like, do I have to say it again?" And then he'll go silent for a second, and then he'll say, "Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. I got it, sir. No problem. I'll say it, sir." So it's not his choice for most of it.
I think the thing that we often forget with WWE is that it's a TV show, which is, always our defense when someone says, wrestling's fake, right? And you're like, yeah, of course, it's a TV show, right?
Says Game of Thrones.
Right. Oh, I say that all the time. Yeah, it's fake, right? But the thing with that is, yeah, it's fake, which means it's scripted, which means everything is scripted. Sure, not every word that Michael Cole is saying is scripted, but a whole lot of those words are words that he's probably been told beforehand that he needs to say, or the story that he's trying to progress. So we just need to understand that there's a giant script every single week for these shows, and very little of this is being done without someone's approval.
Right.
Out of respect for your time, Chris, I'm only going to ask you one more, just because we appreciate you taking as much time as you've taken. But I do want to ask, as a wrestling fan, and we just start talking about scripts and how much work goes into the shows. But what we're seeing right now, or at least the speculation seems to be, is that some of these scripts are just sort of being torn up last minute and written at the end of it. I mean, if you could choose what you're watching and which direction the WWE would go, and as a fan, what you want to see. Are you happy with the product? Do you think it needs to be, a different direction? Like, what would you do? What would you like to see? What do you think the main issue that most people are complaining about with WWE is right now?
Well, I think when Raw went to 3 hours, that was a really big problem, storyline-wise. I get that revenue-wise, that was the smart choice to make, and I don't think any of us would have said no if the USA Network was willing to pay us all that money as well. But I think that created a whole new issue. And on top of that, I've never been a fan of the brand split, and it's just never worked. And I always hated when like a Raw guy would show up on SmackDown and they'd be like, "What's he doing here? He's not supposed to be here." And you're like, he works for you guys. Of course he's here. So I think that if I was able to make any sort of change, I would get rid of the brand split, and I would get rid of the Universal title and the WWE title and just make it one belt. I think that would be a step in the right direction, I think. Because can you imagine explaining this to someone who doesn't like wrestling? Like, all right, so this guy's the champion, but he's only the champion on Mondays. And then this guy's the champion, but he's the champion on Tuesdays. It's like, well, who's the champion then? They're like, what? You know what I mean? Like, it's very hard to explain to someone who doesn't get this world.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Not everybody agrees with us on the brand split stuff, but I'm with you on that one. I think Brandon had a question for you too about the brand split. Now that you've got him thinking, Brandon, are you still there? Oh, we might have lost him.
Oh, I'm still here. I'm good.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge fan of the brand split, but I mean, just in general, I think that it hasn't been incorporated properly. But when I'm thinking back on the original brand split, and then just the first few years of that, at least up until like I don't know, just before like the 2010s, I would say I thought it was really good. But now, I mean, any implementation of it afterwards has just felt really like they haven't really put the effort in, I guess I could say. So I also see your reasoning where it doesn't make sense to have 2 world champions. And I think that was also solved when you had the Undisputed Champion at the time, right? He can go on both shows.
Yep, I like that.
Becky Lynch now is that same kind of vibe, even though they're treating it differently, where she's actually defending her title on both shows and she's being very overexposed on both shows. But that's a whole different conversation. So I find it interesting that we have a different opinion on that, but also a kind of similar one where they're not doing it right. But obviously, you were more in favor of it not being done.
I just don't know if they've ever done it right. And I get that if they did just do one brand, they'd have a lot of trouble putting all their superstars on television. I know that'd be a major problem. They have enough trouble right now getting all the Raw guys on Raw and all the SmackDown guys on SmackDown. And I don't just mean guys, like men and women on both shows. And obviously making the brand split go away is not going to help that issue.
Yeah, they have a lot of talent and it's a lot to go around. And again, when you have people that don't even want to have wrestle under huge contracts, it becomes even more of a complicated issue. But
it's a super exciting time to be a wrestling fan, and I think that if we have the same conversation 6 months from now, after WWE or after AEW has debuted, maybe things will look a little bit different. Maybe this is going to be the best thing to ever happen to WWE. Not that it's competition, but just it forces them to think outside the box, because they haven't needed to for the last, whatever it is, 19 years, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have you back on at some point then to talk about AEW once they have their foot in the door a little more and they're kind of established. See where your thoughts are at that point.
Yeah, let's do it. I'd love to be back on.
Yeah. So, before we let you go, we want to make sure you get a chance to give yourself a little plug. Not that you need it. I'm sure all of our, listeners, anyone that's on our website already knows about you more than they know about us, regardless of how they're going to find you here. But where can the listeners find you?
It's just my name, Chris Van Vliet, VanVliet. That's on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook, and of course my YouTube channel. And if you ever have watched any of my videos on YouTube, a huge thank you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, it'd be awesome. I'd be super grateful if you would subscribe to my channel.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Chris. We appreciate the time on behalf of both Brandon and myself, our listeners at the Smart Marks of Wrestling podcast. I can't thank you enough for taking almost an hour with us to talk about wrestling and to talk about your path towards what you're doing and, maybe what you're going to be doing in the future. So I appreciate it. And once again, thank you for coming on with us.
Of course. No, thank you guys for making this happen. You're awesome.